Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the ArmyPink podcast, where we like to shine a light on abuse so that we can help people and give them tools on learning from real life experiences that will hopefully foster strength and empowerment and awareness. We have a brand, a lifestyle brand, where we develop products, and we have our Peace Pendant, where we donate $1 to the Los Angeles-based nonprofit Peace Over Violence. And that helps someone escape from abuse by providing transportation. And we hope you'll like and subscribe to our channel and our podcast. And mostly our podcast in the past have been about guests sharing their stories of abuse. And through that, we hope, as our audience, you can learn and identify from the struggles. But today we're really excited because we have Kristina joining us, and she is going to share with you all kinds of tools and tips and knowledge and information about how to live a healthier life. She's a registered clinical therapist. She has her master's degree in psychology. She's a researcher, and she's the creator of her own YouTube channel called The Shift Society. Did I say that right, Julia?
Sorry, my membership community is the Shift Society. My YouTube channel is just under my name, Kristina Counseling.
Okay, I'm glad we clarified that.
Yes.
And I think you have like over 300,000 subscribers. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's great.
Amazing humans coming to learn and have and feel better. So it's very inspiring.
Yes, I love that. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about, which I think is so important, and I think it leads a lot of people down a path that they don't want to be in, is because they're not setting boundaries. And you have a lot of insights into that and how to live that healthier, better life. And how that, I think, could really have a major impact in prevention of abuse. I would venture to guess if someone has knowledge about that and self-love and boundaries, they're going to be a little more likely, not always, but to avoid those kind of situations. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, and one of the things I noticed in watching your videos, you said that you like to help men and women with the crap that's holding them back. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which I love that too. It's like very clear, you get it. So with that, I don't know if you want to tell us like what prompted you to go into this and help. I think that's always kind of interesting. Like, what was the precipice to this?
Yeah, I don't know. It was a very kind of pivotal moment. I actually have a book. It's called Drive Your Own Darn Bus, and really teaching tools for getting in charge of your own mind and your own emotions. Because one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who it's from, and I should look this up, but basically the quote says something like, if you want to stop yourself from getting splinters in your feet, you can either go around and try to pad the world in rubber, or you can put on a pair of shoes.
Oh, that's profound.
And that is exactly what I teach, is instead of trying to control everything around us and make the life around us easy for us, we work on building up our own mental and emotional strength and resilience. So we're putting on our own pair of shoes so that we can handle whoever or whatever comes into or around our lives.
Right.
And so I had this this is what my book, Drive Your Own Darn Bus, is all about, teaching you how to put on your own pair of shoes. It's also what I teach in a more deep, personal way in my membership community, the Shift Society. But it all came about in this, the reason why I bring this up is because it's a story in my book about this pivotal moment when I was about 14 years old, sitting in the back seat of one of my best friend's parents' sedans, and we were sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store while her mom ran in to grab something, but she'd left the car running with our favorite kind of pop radio station on. And it came into, while we were sitting there listening to music, it transitioned into this nightly talk show called Sex, Lies, and Audio Tape, which was essentially a relationship advice podcast, or I guess not a podcast, it didn't have podcasts in the 90s, but it was a talk show. And it was a local talk show. And this woman, people would call in and talk about their relationship struggles. And she was something that I didn't even really know existed at the time, called a registered clinical counselor. And people would sit there and they'd talk to her about their problems, and she would help them work through it. And she had these really, even at 14, I thought these really profound and deep and important insights for people. And she was really helping people work through things. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but this is what I want to do.
That's awesome.
And
so she was really influential in starting your career.
yes, but then I didn't really get it, or I didn't know if it was possible. So I kind of put that dream dormant until about 10 years later. And when I was at my cousin's wedding, and I kind of always wanted to become a therapist, but I didn't really love school. It turns out that it wasn't that I didn't love higher education. I just didn't really love learning things that I wasn't interested in. And so I didn't think I was smart enough or capable enough to go back and do a master's degree. And I was afraid of another 2 years of school. But then one day I was at my cousin's wedding. I was 24 years old, and I was sitting with his aunt and uncle from the other side of the family. And they were talking about what their children were doing, who I hadn't seen since we were kids. And they said, oh, well, Sarah, Sarah, I said, what's Sarah up to? And Sarah was this girl who's a couple years younger than me. She was my cousin's cousin on the other side. And I just remember Sarah being a little bit whiny, a little bit bratty, kind of following me and my cousin around, trying to get included, And then I said, what's Sarah doing? They're like, oh, Sarah's in school right now to become a chiropractor.
Oh.
And, for sake of privacy, let's say her name was Sarah Brown. And I was like, if little whiny tag along Sarah Brown can become a chiropractor, then you better believe I can become a therapist. Let's do this. No more messing around. Yeah. And that moment was this pivotal moment where I'm like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. Wow. And it took me 6 years to finally graduate with my master's degree. And if I had known it would have taken, 6 years to do a 2-year degree with everything, upgrading and getting into grad school and doing all that, I probably wouldn't have done it. But in this case, ignorance was bliss. And
yeah, sometimes you don't know just what you're getting into. And by that time, it's too late. And that's probably a good thing.
Sometimes it's good to not really know it. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And it's like, well, this is my dream, so I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I'm committed. Yeah. And I always say what I lack in intelligence and raw talent, I make up for in my sheer will and determination once I set my mind to something. So grateful for that trait. However, I developed it, learned it, or was born with it.
Yeah. Well, now you're providing all this great information and these tools. So, on that note, one of your key topics was boundaries, which I think ties in so much to what, can be helpful for someone in abuse. So,
absolutely.
Can you talk about some of the key items around, I think some people, and I'm not a clinical psychologist like you, but we feel guilty, like if we set boundaries, like I shouldn't have, I'm a bad person. I don't want to do that. But
totally.
It's really and we have to do it.
Well, it is really healthy. And we think so often about boundaries, like, why do I feel uncomfortable setting a boundary? So when I'm thinking about setting a boundary is because something has happened that doesn't make me comfortable, that doesn't feel good for me. Right. And so there needs to be a line here. There needs to be, something kind of set up for my own self-protection and preservation. But then we feel guilty about it because we're like, I don't want to make somebody else uncomfortable with my boundary. Right. So someone is doing something that is making us uncomfortable, and we'd rather keep ourselves stuck and uncomfortable than, heaven forbid, risk the idea of somebody else being uncomfortable with our boundary. We're not saying, we're not imposing, some kind of harm on them. We're saying, I don't want this done to me. And we're so afraid of that, right? We're so afraid. We're not actually harming someone by saying, please don't do that. I don't like that. I'm not okay with that. Please stop, right? But we are so afraid of what they're going to think of us.
Right. And I think, like you just said something, like there's kind of like two different areas of boundaries. There's obviously the, this isn't what I asked for, please stop. Like someone's sexually abusing. But then there's just the boundaries of maybe giving too much or accepting crap and saying no, I'm not going to do that. And that's not okay. Or it doesn't make me happy.
Or even just, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Right. I think especially for those of us who are socialized as women, we haven't been socialized to believe that what we want and our comfort
Mhm.
is important. It's always about what other people want. How can we serve? How can we give? How can we make everyone else comfortable? How can we meet other people's needs, where it doesn't even consider that, like, oh, actually my needs in this situation don't, it's not all that matters, but it's part
Right.
of what matters, right? Like I count too. And it's just so indicative of that, that we would rather allow somebody else to make us uncomfortable with their actions than to potentially make them uncomfortable with our boundary.
Right. And that kind of lays into, and we've always heard that, if you are a healthier person and you are loving yourself and you're having that strength to set those boundaries, you're going to be a better person in a relationship
Totally.
because
Totally.
you're healthier. You have a better viewpoint on yourself. And I think using that is very key and
Well,
very
and boundaries don't mean that I am mean.
right.
Boundaries mean that I am clear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I am putting forth that clarity. It's not saying, you have to stay out of my yard and no one's allowed in here. It's saying, if you'd like to come into my yard, these are the rules. If your dog like craps on my lawn, I'm going to ask that you pick it up.
Yeah.
If you use the hose to like wash your car out on the side of the, parked on the side of the road, then I'm going to ask that you wind the hose back up and put it away. If you
Yeah.
take things out and, use it in my yard, then I'm asking us that you clean up after yourself. Now, these are just the expectations I have of if you want to come and play in my yard. And you don't have to do any of this stuff. I'm not going to control you. I'm not going to force you. But if you don't, then you won't be welcome to come into my yard, and we can maybe have a conversation or interactions over the fence, right? There will be a little bit of distance there because you have not respected what I need in my space to feel
Right.
respected and valued in this relationship. And
But that
so
takes strength, doesn't it, to finally get to that spot and do that?
you know what? I don't know if it takes strength, Cynthia, insofar as a genuine belief that what I want, think, need, and feel counts too. And it's
Yeah.
not about being strong, it's about
Right.
being clear. It's
Yeah.
about having that strong or that healthy,
Mhm.
solid relationships with ourselves, right?
Mhm.
If we're relying on strength to do it, then it's going to feel hard,
Right.
right? If we are falling back into a place of our own, an extension of our own self-respect, then it's going to feel good.
Right. Well, I remember you watching one of your videos, you told the story about, the office rent and the
Yes.
well, I thought that was really ballsy of that gal to want to have a break on her rent because she was going on a 2-week vacation in December. And I thought, wow, we all know the rules. You pay the rent, you pay the rent, you can't. But you said you were kind of taken aback, right? Because how could she? And you wouldn't expect anybody to like lay that on you. But then I love it when you kind of like you give permission to say when somebody's gonna be that bold to be like that and ask you a question like that, you have permission to be just as bold.
Yeah.
Your
Feel as
response.
free with your no as they are with their ask,
Yes. Yes.
right?
And I think we forget that too. I mean,
Totally.
we
It's
we just
okay.
yeah, it's
It's
okay.
okay to say no. It's okay for people. We don't have to be put off when someone asks something of us. We just have to feel secure that we can say no. And the interesting thing about boundaries is that I find that, and this is kind of a bit of a tough one to hear, and I realize this in my own life as well, is that one of the reasons why we don't set boundaries is because we'd rather feel resentful than guilty,
Mhm.
right? So if
Mhm.
I set a boundary and someone doesn't like it and they're not pleased with me for that, then I'm going to feel guilty because I'm going to think that I've done something wrong. And I don't want to
Right.
sit with my own sort of self having made something inconvenient or less convenient or not been willing to be there for someone. So I I'd rather, I don't want to feel guilty about that. I don't want to sit with that guilt. So I'm going to say yes, even though I don't want to, in order to avoid the guilt. But then my yes is not a true yes because I don't actually want to. I'm just doing it to not feel guilty. And then I resent the person. I feel resentful. I feel irritated. I feel angry. I, have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I'm annoyed with them.
And they don't even know it. And then
they don't
you're putting
know.
a wedge
And that's
in the
selfish.
relationship.
Right? I think that is far more selfish than just being honest and clear, and to take responsibility, to be like, I would rather feel resentment than guilt, and that's not fair to our relationships. But what if I could get to the place where I could set boundaries confidently, clearly, and kindly, and not have to feel either, not to feel guilty or resentful? And that is the goal, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, that is very profound. I mean, what you just said there. And I think people really need to take a look at that, because then you're creating this whole other thing that could linger on and cause damage as you go on, right? It's like, and another thing you talked about, I want to just say that I don't know what's wrong with me, but I love it when people ask me a hard question or something really bold, because I love people when they're just open and direct, because I'm somewhat direct. So, but then I always think like, well, if you're that direct, then I can give you my direct answer. It's okay. And
absolutely.
So I think, and it's empowering when you use that voice and you step up to the plate that way. You feel empowered.
Yeah.
So thank you for, highlighting that as a topic. The other thing you talk about is taking clean responsibility. I've never heard that term. I don't know if you made it up, or it's great though. And I'd love you to, expand upon that.
Can you just give me a little bit of context, Cynthia, for what?
It was in one of your videos where I think taking clean responsibility, like being clean, being clear, being direct, when you want to own something, and kind of not, it felt like, don't be wishy-washy, like have the power, take the responsibility. And then I think you said you could get over things faster and things move forward quicker, versus if you don't, and I think it's hard for people to, like, if there is an issue and you did something wrong, to step up and take that responsibility clearly, cleanly, swiftly. Right.
Yes.
I think that's where you were going with it. And I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I understand more of what you're talking about here. So yeah, taking clean responsibility just means being able to acknowledge and accept the parts that I participated in with this, without going into, two ways that we avoid responsibility is over blaming others or over blaming ourselves. Right. And you've talked to the person who is the martyr, who you're like, hey, like that really hurt my feelings when you did that, or that made this difficult, or that was really hard for me. And the person is like, oh, you're right. I'm just a terrible human. I can't do anything right. I'm always failing. Right. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that sucks. Like, that's an avoidance of responsibility. They're going into a shame response because they're not able to reflectively kind of take an honest look at that and be like, okay, maybe something that I did do intentionally or not was not as thoughtful as it could have been. It could have been accidentally offensive. It could have been hurtful. It could have been, absent-minded of me, and it had a negative impact. And just being able to acknowledge that without going into that self-shame, right? That's not clean. Going into shaming and over blaming ourselves for something, it's not helpful. It's not productive. It's not moving anything forward. And it's not responsibility.
Right. And I think that's part of living a healthier life too.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's so hard for us. And I think it's hard for me too, to take clean responsibility. Like I'm quick to just go, oh, my bad. Or, no, you got to like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I did this
I don't know
wrong.
why it's so hard to just say, you know what, you're right. That was inconsiderate of me. That wasn't, kind of me. That I can see how that came across as being not thoughtful or in appreciation of you as a human. And I am sorry. Right. Like, just, it's so easy, but it's not easy when we're living with a lot of shame. Because when someone points out when someone has a complaint for us about something that we've done, we don't see it as, oops, like, shoot, I made a mistake. We're like, oh my goodness, I am a mistake. I am a failure as a human. I am unlovable and unworthy and can't do anything right. Right. And then it's not good for us to be in that place. So we need to be doing our own healing and growth work around that. And it's not good for our relationships when we can't truly give someone a space to feel heard, even if it wasn't intentional, even if it wasn't on purpose, being able to just hear them out and acknowledge their experience, even if it wasn't our intention, and apologizing for that. There's really nothing wrong with that, unless it turns into, in an abusive situation, if you are always being blamed and held responsible for somebody else's feelings. Well, I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't done that. Well, I wouldn't act this way if you weren't doing this. Well, if you could just be more like this, then we wouldn't have these problems, right? Like that very manipulative kind of controlling.
You wouldn't push
blame.
my buttons, we wouldn't get into this situation.
Totally. You shot yourself in the foot. It's your fault that you're being treated this way because you haven't done exactly what I wanted, right? Right.
And I think that's like part of having good relationship tools, especially like in a marriage and back and forth, because as husband and wives, right, we have arguments and we have things that we do wrong because we get utterly so comfortable with each other, right? And so I think having a healthy relationship where you can own it. And I think another thing you said is, you don't find a relationship, but you build a relationship. I think we forget that. I think couples and people think, oh, I found this great relationship. But no, a part of the tools are you have to build a relationship.
Totally.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I think that is very profound in being healthy.
Well, it absolutely is. Like it's in romantic relationships and even in friendships. So this is something that I've come across a lot through working with people and working with adults, is the struggle to find really good and strong, healthy friendships, right? And we actually we bring in special guest speakers into my membership community. And I had this woman, Danielle Bayard Jackson, who is fantastic. And she is a friendship coach. And she helps coach,
I love that.
Adult men and women on how to create and nurture and foster healthy, close, connected adult relationships, like platonic relationships. And she was talking so much about that. And she's like, you don't always have to find new friends. Sometimes there's people in your life who you just need to nurture more. You need to nurture and invest more in those relationships. And that's what allows them to grow and become healthier and better and more connected. And it has to be a two-way street. Like there has to be both people, investing in the relationship. Now, the myth is that it always has to be both people initiating in the same way, and it doesn't. I'm an initiator. I get that about myself. I tend to be the one that initiates first, and I don't mind. I'm not sitting here keeping score and being like, I initiated the last 4 times, you have to initiate the next 4. I'm not like that. I'm like, as long as you are accepting my invitations, or if you have to decline, you're providing another option and showing that you are interested in investing in this relationship, regardless of whether or not you are initiating, then I'm good. Like, as long as I know that you like me and want to spend time with me, even if you're not initiating, I'm good. And so really looking at how relationships require investment, initiation, involvement, emotional intimacy, and those things, even if you're living in close proximity to someone like a partner, they don't just happen on their own. And we get, like you said, we get so comfortable. We're like, I live with them. I see them all the time. But are you investing in them beyond just going through the motions of keeping a house going and meals coming and clean happening and bills paying?
Yeah, right. I mean, and what you said about like the friendship too thing, I think that I'm an initiator too. And sometimes you could get caught up in like, you don't want to feel like you're chasing it or you're doing all the work and that there is some reciprocation. But by the same token, I have to check myself to not have expectations that are how I act. Like, well, maybe because I'm an initiator, I like to entertain, I like to have people over, I like to keep it going, but not everybody's like that, and it's okay. But like you said, as long as you're getting some of that ebb and flow, and you're
Yes.
not doing all of the work. And I think it's good to be conscious of that too, that your expectations sometimes might not be exactly the same. Like we
Yeah,
interpret them all differently.
exactly. Exactly. And creating space for people who do things differently in a
Yes.
relationship, as long as it still feels like there's effort being made and nurturing being done. Yeah.
And another topic that you brought up, which I've never heard anybody, touch on this, which I thought was amazing, but again, so profound, is, being raised by immature parents.
Mm.
I mean, I was like, whoa, I've never heard of that, but it is so true because how many of us have had parents that back in the day, they didn't really have the skill set. They kind of just got married. They had a lot of kids. They just struggled through it. And there's certain ramifications. Now I think, there's more planning. They get their careers going, then they have kids, they have the time to invest. They're not so, and I think we don't, and we also think that our parents are like untouchable, like, well, that's the way, they're perfect, they know everything, but
Yeah.
they're not.
They're
So I
just
thought
older
that was,
people. They're
they're just older
just
people.
older people. And I remember realizing that when I had children, I'm like, oh, parents are just older people. Like there's no rite of passage that you go through. All of a sudden you are all knowing, all wise, all knowledgeable. I mean, of course you have your life experience that you can draw from, but parents are just people with their own issues, their own trauma, their own pain, their own baggage, their own disrupted and distorted beliefs, their own struggles. And then, so many things that are unhealed that then they intentionally or not pass on to their children, right? And then we
Yes.
think that they know everything, that they are always right. And you come to this age where you're just like, oh, they're actually just older people. And I have to figure out what makes sense for me
Right.
and maybe do some undoing of some things that I was taught that they thought made
Habits.
sense,
Yeah.
or yeah, but actually don't make sense for me and aren't healthy or helpful for me. And really just realizing that, like, it's okay that my parents, like, I'm not going to blame my parents because we're all just human. And but just knowing that they're just people. And
Right.
I am responsible for my own self and my own life and what I want to be thinking and how I want to be showing up and the healing that I want to be doing. Like, no one is coming to do it for me. No one is
Right.
coming to fix me. No one is coming to save me. No one is coming to pave the path so that my life is easy and lovely. Like, what I want, no, there is nobody else who is going to be as impacted by our well-being as
Mm-hmm.
we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is my responsibility. If I want something to be different, if I want something to be better, who is it up to other than me?
Yeah. Create the life you want to live.
Yeah.
And in order to
Create the
do that,
feelings you want to have, create the
yeah.
experiences you want to be having, create the days and the time and the intention that you want to be having. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all of these things kind of circle around that. Having a good, healthy, happy life is being able to be, have a voice if someone throws
Yes.
something at you that you're like, oh, have the voice to come back with, a very clear boundary or a no or a yes. And then I
Yes.
think also, building a relationship versus just finding one, and
Yes.
also you talked about self-love and having that self-love and being the person you need to be in order to be in a better relationship. All
Yeah.
of those things create such a better life for
Yes.
someone.
Well, it is like, and self-love is actually, so many people think, oh, that's so selfish, that's so self-indulgent. It's actually one of the least selfish things that you can do. Having a strong, secure, and healthy relationship with yourself
Hmm.
is how you contribute in a healthy way to
Hmm.
society, to your relationships. You feeling like whole and grounded and peaceful and free creates a better world for everyone. Because here's the thing, when we are struggling, when we are in pain, what are we always talking about? We're always
Hmm.
talking about our struggles, our pain, what we're going through, how hard things are for us. And that's not a bad thing. That's normal. But our focus is around our struggles. It's around us. It's around surviving, right? And that, if we're going to look at what is more self-involved, that is far more self-involved than feeling comfortable and confident and secure in who we are, because then we're not focused on ourselves. We're focused on what we can contribute, what we can create, you know, what we can cultivate. We're focused outward instead of inward. And so it's the exact opposite. And also, just for the sake of it, not just about, you know, what we can contribute when we are feeling more whole and secure, what we contribute to others, but also we have the right as humans to just go through life feeling whole and secure for us.
Right? Absolutely.
For us.
Yes. You know, just in wrapping up, are there some things you can leave our audience with in terms of how to be stronger, how to get there? I mean, you know, it takes time to get confident, right? And where we are now today, age and wisdom is part of that. Going through.
Well, I have two things. I have what's called like a micro offer. This is just a really accessible offer that's a low cost one. And then I have a free one. So I have two things for you. The first one is my 25 ways to say no. So this is a great entry point. If you struggle with saying no, it's 25 ways that are both clear, clean, and kind. So if you're like, ugh, I don't want to be rude, I don't want to be people to put off, and that's fair, right? Like, we still want to consider other people's experience of our no. And so being able to say no while also being kind about it, it matters, right? Especially for those who tend to be more empathic, more sort of sensitive, you know, heart-centered people. That's important. So I've got 25 ways to say no. I'll give you the link to that. So you can share that, Cynthia. And then I also have a workbook, an interactive workbook called The Simple Steps to Self-Trust. And that is a low cost, it's a $17 offer. I'll send you the link to as well. And what this does is it really helps you learn the steps to build a secure relationship with yourself. Because if you think about it, we don't really think of building a trusting relationship with ourselves, but the foundation of any strong and secure and healthy relationship is trust with others. And so learning how to cultivate that within ourselves, that is the birthplace of confidence. That is the birthplace of feeling loving and safe and secure in who we are, is by building that self-trust.
Oh, those are two great. Yeah.
So I'll send you the link to both of those.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, again, I loved having you, because I think this is really important stuff to either avoiding abuse, or if you're in abuse, recognizing some things you can do to be stronger, confident, set boundaries, all of that stuff. And you're so full of energy too. I love your enthusiasm. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia. It has been a joy.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.